Good afternoon. This is Bambi de la Garza. I'm turning in my last assignment, which is assignment 5, which is crafting our project together. I made a slideshow presentation for y'all to go over the slides of what I did and my steps on my project. First, you're going to be choosing a topic. First, you'll need to pick between a topic between World War II and up to 1990. That was my section of our class topic list. So what I did was go through different timelines to choose a specific topic that I would like to talk about. I picked 3 topics through those timelines on which I found interesting and the ones that I might be interested in working on. My examples were the Cuban Missile Crisis, Pearl Harbor, and Berlin Wall. On my next slide, as you can see here, I went ahead and put deep, uh, a brief description of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Um, the Cuban Missile Crisis is also known as the October Crisis of 1962, the Caribbean crisis confrontation between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, which escalated into an international crisis when American deployments of missiles in Italy and Turkey were matched by Soviet deployments of similar ballistic missiles in Cuba. Despite its short time frame, the Cuban Missile Crisis remains a defining moment in U.S. national security and nuclear war preparations. I posted also a little picture of a moment that they had during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I found this subject very interesting. I just did not really pick this one. I also decided to research another topic, which was the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall was a guarded concrete barrier that physically and ideologically divided Berlin from 1961 to 1989. A construction of the wall was commenced by the German Democrat Republican on August 13, 1961. The wall cut off West Berlin from the surrounding East Germany, including East Berlin. The barrier included guarded towers placed along concrete walls, accompanied by a wide area that contained an anti-vehicle trench, bed of nails, and other defenses. They also later known as the Death Strip. I found that very interesting, and I mean, it was a good subject I would actually like to learn about too. The topic, I put a picture of the Berlin Wall right here for y'all as an example. And then my other topic I looked at through the events was Pearl Harbor. I put on here a brief description also what Pearl Harbor was and a picture of Pearl Harbor. It is American Lagoon Harbor on the island of Oahu, Hawaii, west of Honolulu. It's long been visited by the naval fleet of the U.S. before it was acquired from the Hawaii Kingdom by the United States with the signing of the Reciprocate Treaty of 1875. Much of the harbor and surrounding lands are now a U.S. Navy deep-water naval base. It also the headquarters of the United States Pacific Fleet. The U.S. government first obtained exclusive use of the inlet and the right to maintain and repair coaling stations for ships here in 1887. The surprise attack by the Imperial Japanese Navy on December 7, 1941, led the U.S. to declare war on the Empire of Japan, making the attack of Pearl Harbor the immediate cause of the United States' entry into World War II. This was very interesting for me. I wanted to learn more about Pearl Harbor, so I went ahead and picked this topic as my topic for my paper. The next step that we worked on was to get sources. To start working on your project, you have to do a lot of research, so you have to go through many sources. I put a brief description here on what primary sources are. The study of history as an academic discipline, a primary source, or also known as an original source, is an artifact, document, diary, manuscript, autobiography, recording, or any other source of information that was created at the time under the study. It serves as the original source of information about the topic. Similar definitions can be used in library science, other areas of scholarship, all through different fields of somewhat different definition in journalism. A primary source can be a person with a direct knowledge of a situation or a document written by such a person. This was a definition to help you understand what a primary source is. Um, After a primary source, you also need to get secondary sources. So I also put a brief description of what secondary sources are. A secondary source is a document or recording that relates or discusses information originally presented elsewhere. A second source can contrast with primary sources, which an original source of information being discussed. A primary source can be a person with direct knowledge of a situation or a document created by a person. Where to find secondary sources? Well, you can always use WorldCat and just start to help you start looking for some secondary sources. So what I did here was give you an example. I put primary sources, and on there I listed every source I could find that might be primary source where I could use to help me write my paper. I also put on here secondary sources. Same thing. I put some samples. I wrote a brief description of my secondary source and where I found it so that I could go back to look at it if I decided to choose that secondary source. This would be a good, helpful way to keep track of your sources so that if you need to go back to look at it, if it's an online link, you can always click on the link and it will link you back to the source you were looking at to help you research your notes. The next step is to use your sources. How do you use these sources? Well, you have to shorten how many sources you're using. You'll be able to pick like 3 primary sources, 3 secondary sources, and it'll help you put your project together, basically narrowing it down to something more simple for you to use. I use my sources by reading the articles, reading through them, choose which ones had most information that could use to help me write my paper involving the topic that I was working on, which was Pearl Harbor. After you do that, you would like to bring it all together. To bring it all together, you really do need to narrow down the sources to study on them more. Take notes from each source that can help you with your project. You would also want to make sure you add your sources, your page numbers for footnotes that you're going to be using for your paper. You would also want to add your own thoughts and your notes in this process. Identify keywords through all those sources. You can use those as headings and as main topics for the paper you'll be writing. All these little hints and tips will help you bring your project together. Next, we would craft the project together for your completion. Some important questions. Did you find value in the system that we used? Well, yes, definitely. It helped me come up with a good plan, an outline on how to get my project started. It helps steps to put your project together. With a good plan, it'll help narrow down and give you all the information that you need to do your project. Um, it, it was really interesting to use this this system because I've never done it before, so it was really helpful. I'd be interested in using it again. Would you switch in the future or make adjustments? No, I would not switch in the future. I would just make some adjustments depending on the type of paper you'd be writing for a class because each class is different, and if you're using the system for other classes, depending on what kind of paper you're writing. Some papers give you the option to choose, like how this one did. You had a wide range, a time frame that you can pick up an event to write your paper on. So that one gave you a broader range. So some papers or some people might give you a more narrow variety of choosing topics. So, I mean, you can always figure out how to make your adjustments based on that. Do I see any potential problems in writing a project at this point? Nope, I don't really see any potential problems. I think only if you forget to use one of your steps or if you skip a step, then yeah, then you will have a problem because then you'll be messing up your whole plan and you have to go back and forth. So, like, if you follow the system and you go step by step, like how we were going through it week by week, it will be a perfect way to help you write your paper. Um, it's a very interesting way to put your system a plan in place, and it really does work. So hopefully on the next paper, I'll be able to use the same system to do my next project. Um, the last step after you have all these things done and you're ready, you can finally start writing and working on your paper and finish your project. I appreciate all your help today, and thank you for listening to my weekly assignment. And I learned a lot, and I'm glad I learned a system on how to write a paper. Thank you.